Porto and other cities have experienced violent protests, and in some instances law enforcement agencies were accused of using excessive force.
Both the African Union, the SADC, the European Union, the Commonwealth observers, all of them mentioned that these elections were not free and fair.
President of Mozambique has just been inaugurated. Power, corruption, international intrigue, turmoil has gripped the coastal nation of Mozambique. And at the center of all of this, it is the former president whose administration had a lot of allegations of corruption. And now we're seeing this transition of power where a new presidential candidate is coming in from the same political party. And we're looking at a lot of political turmoil.
Frequent occurrence. Live ammunition and tear gas fired at young Mozambican men.
Oh, it's just tear gas. Tear gas, yeah.
As they take on the state that's ruled longer than they've been alive.
Hold on.
Where's Rafa? Okay.
Their mothers are tired too. We're dying because of this, she says. They're throwing it in our homes, morning and night.
One government, 50 years, one government. No, my friend, man. I'm tired.
The guys behind him guard the barricade.
There you see it, the post-election violence in Mozambique. It began in October, and it's still continuing even today as they're busy inaugurating a president. There's unrest, and over 250 people have been killed since the protests began. Now, in the major cities, they're literally paralyzed. Businesses have closed, transportation has halted. Over 6,000 inmates escaped from a prison in Maputo. Thousands of Mozambicans are fleeing the country in numbers, crossing borders. 2,000 have been recorded to cross over to Malawi, 1,000 into Eswatini. The situation has been described as the worst violence ever since 1975.
Porto and other cities have experienced violent protests, and in some instances law enforcement agencies were accused of using excessive force. South Africa says it's very concerned.
It is a situation that needs engagement, mediation, to continue to call for calm, to allow the electoral process, the Constitutional Council of Mozambique to make a determination.
Opposition leaders say the people's will must be respected.
The situation is quite volatile now because the elections were not considered free, transparent and credible, and not even fair. Both the African Union, the SADC, the European Union, the Commonwealth observers, all of them mentioned that these elections were not free and fair.
Meanwhile, the Border Management Authority is keeping a close eye in one of the key ports of entry at Slibombo between South Africa and Mozambique.
The situation is quite scary when people are saying that fraud is taking place in an election. And a lot of people are going with Mondlane, who is somebody who has gone into exile as the leader of the opposition because of all these protests. And now he has declared himself, upon his return to Mozambique, as the new president. Now, the unrest in Mozambique is directly linked to Daniel Chapo's contested victory, which was in this past presidential election.
Não me interessa o que eu vou passar, mas eu vou a Moçambique e vou provar que eu não estive a Moçambique por medo.
Elections happen. Frelimo, their candidate, they claim that they won the election. chaos breaks out in Mozambique, and the opposition leader, Mondlane, he flees Mozambique in fear of his life, and he decides to come back. And when he comes back and he lands at the airport, he declares himself as the president of Mozambique, placing his hand on the Bible and saying that these elections were not free and fair. Not only one saying this, different observers saying the same thing. The beautiful coastal nation of Mozambique has really been rocked by violence, unrest, just because of these elections. Now, Frelimo, who has got their presidential candidate as Daniel, they're saying that they won the election by 65%. However, all these conflicts are saying no, they did not win this election. Now, if you remember, Mozambique gained independence from Portugal in 1975 after decades of war. Now, this is a country that has already suffered civil war from 1977 to 1992. And Frelimo and Romano, as the opposition, were parties that were always going with each other. And it's basically a country that has struggled a lot with political instability, violence, poverty and underdevelopment, corruption and mismanagement. And at the heart of this corruption, what young people are saying in Mozambique, and what a lot of people are saying, is that there was 2.7 billion that the Mozambican government took in 2016 for the government. However, this debt that they took from other nations, it was never used for the country. In fact, till date, it's still called the hidden debt, because the country, they don't know what the loan was for. The loan was kept hidden. None of the borrowed money was ever used on the people. They're saying that bribes, they're saying people were paid money, they say no services, no products, nothing happened for the Mozambican people. Now, how do you have a government, a ruling party, Frelimo, which takes a $2.7 billion loan, and that money is called hidden debt, and none of it can be explained? Now, people that have tried to defend all of this have all said that they're rejecting these statements, and they're saying that all these things were proven in court. And this scheme involved 3 state-owned companies that took massive loans and money, allegedly diverting all this money to corrupt officials, undisclosed debts. And this has really plunged the debts of Mozambique into a financial crisis. This hidden debt scandal was part of the reason why a lot of countries said we can't do business, or we can't give or be involved with Mozambique. It ruined the international reputation, because they're saying, how does a country get funding or take a loan and none of this money is used for the people or disclosed to the people, and it's even called hidden debt? Mozambique's economic stability and international credibility are really presenting an ongoing challenge for the ruling party there. And they're really trying to implement what they call anti-corruption measures, but young people are fed up. People are fed up of governments that don't want to listen to them. And there is a very big problem with a president staying in power for too long. The first thing is that when a political party like Frelimo has been in power for such a very long time, it begins to affect the independence of the courts, the legislature, the executive power. It leads to this super political power that just keeps on going with nobody actually stopping it. And young people are really fed up. And that's the reason why they've all gone out to march to the streets, burning down buildings, very upset, because it's their future that's on the line.
But Mondlane has pledged to install himself as the country's leader instead. Upon his return, he called himself the president and accused the government of genocide.
I, Venancio Mondlane, president elected by the Mozambican people, not by the Constitutional Council, not by the CNS, but elected by the genuine will of the people. I swear on my honor that I have served the Mozambican homeland and the Mozambicans. I realized that the regime opted for a strategy of creating a kind of silent genocide. People are being kidnapped from their homes. People are being extrajudicially executed in the woods. Mass graves with supposed supporters of Venancio Mondlane are now being discovered.
Mondlane could face arrest for inciting weeks of protests that have crippled the nation. While such statements could land him in trouble, Mondlane also extended an offer of peace. He says he is ready to take part in the negotiations over the disputed polls.
I am here to break this narrative that I am voluntarily absent from dialogue initiatives. So I'm here. I'm here in the flesh to say that if you want to negotiate, if you want to talk to me, you want to come to the conversation table, I'm here.
Mondlane was welcomed by large crowds in the capital of Maputo. Hundreds of chanting supporters, some blowing whistles, headed there to see him. Security forces had restricted access to the airport where he landed. In some areas, gunshots were also heard, while clashes repeatedly broke out between security forces and his supporters. Mondlane's homecoming is giving many Mozambicans hope, who have been rallying against the incumbent party and want him as their leader.
With his arrival is a hope that opens for us, is more of a shine as we all are in the darkness. With his arrival is a bit of relief.
Young people all over Mozambique are hoping for much needed change. And it is a pattern in Africa, unfortunately, where elections are neither free or fair. And even when observers still speak to that point, we've seen this in SADC in Zimbabwe and now in Mozambique, we still find that the cries of young people fall on deaf ears. And when young people are frustrated and they go to the streets and they start marching and they start burning down buildings, it is the very same government that's oppressing them that calls for them to stand still or sit down and call for peace. Now, how does this make sense? How do we keep the majority of young people displeased and in subjugation? Unemployment is ripe, poverty is ripe, underdevelopment is ripe in Mozambique. And when their voices are crying out to say, let's have a free and fair election, and they've got Mondlane, who is the person that they want to get into power, and they're saying, and even international observers are saying that the elections were not free and fair, how do we allow an inauguration to happen? And presidents come from all around the world to sit on that inauguration and declare this person president. Africa seems to be a place where political independence, where the voice of young people, where democracy keeps being trampled on as we watch and keep silent. So many dignitaries and presidents were present in the inauguration, even though observing missions declared the elections not free and fair. How do we allow this to happen? Now, when you look deeper into the situation, you begin to realize that this is part of a much bigger plan. A big plan to ensure that Africa remains under the shackles of the US, China, India, UAE, and every other continent, because we will never see any change in Africa. Because the moment there is a glimpse of change, things like this happen. Political situations are destabilized, the voice of young people is not heard, and people are put into power without free and fair elections. Now, I'll tell you why this is happening. Mozambique possesses over 180 trillion, you heard that right, cubic feet of natural gas reserves. Mozambique is actually the third largest holder of gas reserves in Africa, right behind Nigeria and Algeria. Now, the country's relationship with oil and gas has been very dramatic throughout these years. They have realized that they have these resources. However, these resources have not been tapped into. Let me give you a little picture of what type of country Mozambique is and why it's being targeted.
Mozambique has found gas, and lots of it. This southern African state, situated to the northeast of South Africa and the east of Zimbabwe, looks set to become a continental gas titan and could become the world's fourth largest exporter of natural gas, fundamentally transforming the country. In 2006, Italian energy giant Eni was granted a license to explore for gas off the state's northeastern coast, known as the Cabo Delgado region. After 5 years of exploration, the company announced that it had discovered what it called supergiant resources in the Rovuma Basin off the Cabo Delgado coast that is now estimated to hold 2.4 trillion cubic meters of natural gas, setting the state off on an extraordinary economic journey that could change the country's fortunes, though the road will most certainly be bumpy and with many obstacles.
There you have it. Mozambique could become the world's next best superpower. But that's not going to happen because of political interference, because the voice of young people again is not being heard, and because justice has not been served in Mozambique. Now, if you're watching this video, I want you to post in the comment section, Mozambique, we need a re-election. Young people of Mozambique should not just accept things as they are. They should be calling for a re-election that is free and fair and making sure that the whole world can watch, because there is significant international interest in Mozambique's gas resources. I mean, Ukraine, which is renowned for supplying gas in the European Union or the European area. It's very much left a big demand for new suppliers of energy to Europe. And Total Energies, ExxonMobil, these are billion-dollar companies. They would like to be involved in getting Mozambique and supplying the EU, and they're looking at over 30% of the EU's gas supply coming from Mozambique imports. However, it's important to note that these gas projects have faced significant challenges, and this is part of the challenges. Security issues. The region is always fighting. People are never at peace or understanding what is going on with money. If you've got a nation where over $2 billion gets taken out as a loan and the country still doesn't know what happens to that money, and even other international countries don't understand what happened, you're creating a situation where the country is sitting literally on trillions, yet nobody can use any of these trillions. Now, we've seen countries like Dubai, and I went on holiday in Dubai, and in Dubai they had oil. And we've heard that that oil has now come to an end. However, when you look at Dubai and what they've been able to create, they used what they had and they were able to become a global superpower, an economic strength, a country that is able to produce for its people. The same thing we were expecting for Mozambique to do through its discovery. However, we're now hearing of a president being inaugurated in an election that wasn't free and wasn't fair. And the worst part about all of this is that it is the voice of young people that is crying out. The older generation, they might be reaching the ages of pension. For them, it might not matter. But for a young man and a young woman in Mozambique who's 18, who's 19, who's 20 years old, hoping for a better future from the natural resources in their own country, that future has literally been snatched out of their hands through tear gas, their own police system brutalizing them, shutting down their voice, and basically showing them that in Africa, no matter what you do, democracy is not at play. Now, take a look at how much money Mozambique could make.
Mozambique's major gas find is expected to be transformative for the country. According to Bloomberg, the state expects to generate $95 billion of gas revenue over a 25-year period. As mentioned before, as of 2019, the country had a GDP of just over $15 billion, making the potential impact of the coming cash influx evident. How the country uses this revenue will determine whether or not it can successfully develop. Mozambique must think long term, laying the foundations for its successful development for when its gas eventually depletes in the distant future. To do this, it could look to numerous states that have successfully utilised their oil and natural gas finds, such as Norway, which has a sovereign wealth fund with over $1 trillion in assets, and the many states of the Persian Gulf, which have laid meticulous plans for the diversification of their economies away from oil. Mozambique is already considering creating a sovereign wealth fund, in which it plans to put 50% of revenue from the first 20 years of gas extraction. Once this initial 20-year period has passed, then 80% of revenue generated would be put into the sovereign wealth fund, while the rest will go into the country's annual budget. The potential creation of a sovereign wealth fund has been touted as a move aimed at making the benefits of the gas find multi-generational, and would be a sensible decision on the part of the state. Just as important, if not more important than a sovereign wealth fund, is the development of the country's infrastructure, mainly in the form of public works projects such as railway building, road building, and port building and expansion. By building critical infrastructure such as roads and railways using revenue generated by its gas find, the country can increase domestic mobility and connectivity, in turn developing other sectors of its economy, something incredibly important for the future. Kicking off a process of economic diversification is essential for Mozambique. Moreover, the country must invest in the future for its burgeoning younger population, which can be done through the building of schools and other educational facilities. Alongside education, Mozambique can improve the general well-being of its population by building hospitals and investing in healthcare. Fundamentally, improving living standards for its citizens must be at the heart of the country's spending strategy for its potential gas-generated wealth. The two main LNG projects in Mozambique are also indirectly and directly expected to create tens of thousands of jobs for Mozambicans, regardless of revenue generated from the exploitation of gas itself. In a lesser developed country with an unemployment rate just under 25% as of 2020, the impact of gas projects alone will be significant, having knock-on effects for the Cabo Delgado region and beyond. All of this said, the road towards development and the position of the world's 4th largest exporter of natural gas has been and will be far from smooth.
The sad part about all of this is that Mozambique could literally be an economic giant in the world, not only Africa. Mozambique could actually give enough power to South Africa, an economy that was recently struggling with load shedding, to the whole of Africa. And that would make Africa competitive globally because we would be able to produce many products at a much cheaper price. If we had to get Mozambique right, I believe that Mozambique could even be greater than Cape Town. The views, the oceans, the islands, the beauty and the landscape that Mozambique has, those clear blue waters are so perfect. Tourism, the gas, the people. Mozambique could be a global superpower. But we see the same thing happen in Africa, and frankly, I'm very tired of it. Every time there's an election, young people's voice are not heard. In South Africa, we saw a lot of young people not even voting because they don't believe in African democracy. This time around, we saw young people in Mozambique standing up and actually going out. But unfortunately, their voices fell on deaf ears. And this is unacceptable because we perpetuate a narrative in Africa that no matter what young people do, they will not be heard. The observers spoke, young people spoke. They were not happy about what happened. They went out and protested. What else are you supposed to do to show that an election was not free and fair? If you're burning down buildings, if you're screaming from the rooftops, what else are you supposed to do? I want you to do me a favor. Don't let this video go down. Share this video with at least 10 people, 10 young people. 10 people from Mozambique, 10 people from anywhere in the world. Share this video on your social media because it's high time that we don't sit back and be afraid of a regime that's able to literally brutalize its own young people. Before I made this video, my concern was if the government of Mozambique can do this to the young people, what are they going to do to myself as a young person? But I decided to say I will not let my voice be shut down. I would rather fight for the truth and fight for what is right. If young people in Mozambique are saying that they are not happy, we do need to hear their voices, understand why they're not happy, understand why they're going to the streets to march, to strike, understand why they're being shot at and risking their lives, and hear them and understand that the elections were not something they were happy about and that they do deserve and should have free and fair elections. We've got companies like Shell, a global company that was planning to build a gas to liquid project in northern Mozambique. However, Shell has revealed that they will no longer be developing this. Literally, companies are now steering away from Mozambique because of such things. And Daniel Chapu, who is the president-elect of Mozambique, who is being inaugurated or was inaugurated recently the 15th of January. But what is painful is the potential impact of his presidency. If his presidency is starting off on the fact that young people were shot at and brutalized, if his presidency of somebody who is Mozambique's first-born president after independence from Portugal in 1975, and this is how it's starting, with Frelimo's rule of 49 years, raising questions and concerns about all these changes that Mozambique or anything is going to be saying. His opposition leader, who's claiming that there was election fraud, is in Mozambique to try and fix this. But however, we cannot allow this to continue. The people of Mozambique, they've considered several actions. They've done a lot. They've done a lot to try and participate in democracy. However, they literally have this as a result. They're asking for transparency. They're asking for government dealings and resources to be managed properly. They're asking for corruption to come to an end. We cannot allow Africa to continue the same way it's been continuing for all this time.
What we are really going to do is to continue to work to support investors in that area and to also continue work to resolve this terrorism situation using two approaches. One approach is to combat terrorism on the ground, but to also find a way to dialogue with those behind this situation so that we can really overcome it and that there can be security and peace in that region, allowing the development of the LNG projects.
Now, that is the president-elect of Mozambique saying that he's going to try and make sure that there is development of oil and gas in this region. But how will this happen if the whole world said that the elections were not free and fair? How are we expecting companies, individuals to come and invest their money? How are we expecting expertise and experts to come and actually be a part of this if the elections themselves are not proper? What African leaders do not realize is that the world watches and the world judges. If your elections and young people are crying out and they're being shot at and they're being abused and people are being released from prisons and it's a whole mess, and you're thinking that you're going to get the whole world to come in and assist you to build a new economy that could boost your whole country, I don't think this is possible. The whole world is waiting for honest countries, people that are willing to do business in an honest way, where if young people are raising concerns, why can't elections be run again? Why can't we do things properly? Mozambique is dire. There's an opportunity for us to have a peaceful change and development in Africa. But unfortunately, every single time we hear of an African story and democracy, we come back to this very same point, where the voice of young people, the future of Mozambique, is not heard. I don't know what it's going to take. I was in Dubai and I looked at what the Sheikh in Dubai, His Royal Highness, who I have much respect for as a leader, has done for the people of the UAE in its 25 years of rule. Dubai is a flourishing country and all they had is oil. The same story should be said about Mozambique, that Mozambique is going to be a flourishing country because they have gas, enough gas or more gas than the oil that Dubai had. However, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I'm really disappointed in this situation, and all I can ask you to do is share this story with as many people as possible to raise awareness, to say something must give, something must change. It cannot be that we continue to watch as leaders in SADC celebrate each other and inaugurate each other as young people are crying, dying, and in suffering on a daily basis.